me and Chud are both ugly white British bastards. So that's
speak
one
for yourself,
but
mate, Jesus. Is this funny, Prime? Is this funny to you? What the f are you
Yeah,
laughing?
no, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. Yeah, it is.
I tell you what, why don't you read off some good stats about black people and laugh at that? How about that? You were the one that was saying an incel is someone that got rejected once. You're the retarded one that said that first of all. You're the one that brought that into the conversation.
No, you need to settle down just a little bit. There is a lefty.
You need to stop being fucking retarded.
There is no, I won't listen to you because I'm talking, Chud. Don't you understand that? See, I'm a man, so don't try and interrupt me.
You said they're going to watch the court ring, and I'm listen. I know you're a fucking woman and you find it difficult to understand a man's talking, okay? But shut the f up and listen, okay?
It sounds like it's just an autism problem. No, you brought it up when you said.
No, I brought up neurodivergence.
Hey, stop and listen. Stop and listen. Stop and listen. Stop.
Guys, it's a Twitch panel. There's a lot of.
Hey, all of you.
Women need to smarten up about how they talk about men.
White people saying, "Well, I've suffered from reverse racism, so I'm a marginalized group." Like, white people actually say this.
They're like an active
should we?
group
Oh, excuse me. I'm talking. Shut up.
Incels, and if so, what is causing it? How do we fix this? Is it even a problem? Should incels be considered a marginalized group? Why or why not? What, if anything, does society owe to incels? Should women do more to help them? Let's get into it, and we will start off with the first person I thought of when I thought of incels, Chud Logic, please.
Obviously, understandable. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think that there's definitely, a lot of empathy and sympathy that should be thrown these people's way. I think because sometimes it's fellas and there's a perception it's white fellas particularly, there is a lack of empathy and sympathy, despite some of the issues being things lefties ought to be very sympathetic about. There's lots of race issues, there's lots of ableism issues that exist when it comes to incels. There's a lot of societal-led issues, a lot of structure issues that create these problems. I think that there's an element as well of feeling like because men share an identity with an oppressor class, with the patriarchy and whatever, that analysis also means that there's less sympathy further. Yeah, I mean, I think that we can be reasonable and we can take issue with maybe some of the rhetoric and some of the memes that come out of these communities, but we can also recognize that there is a genuine concern fundamentally, at the core of that we ought to be considerate of. In terms of should women do more? I don't think women need to do more in and of themselves. I just think that people generally, broadly, and society should be more receptive and understanding of the issues these people face, and that's it, really.
Okay, well, we'll get into what that means, what it means for them to be more understanding, and what actions, if any, should be taken. But we will get through the rest of the guests. Erudite, please.
Yeah, it's probably unsurprising for anyone who's watched my content that I do believe that incels are absolutely part of a marginalist and high-risk group. Do we need more interventions for them? I think self-evidently. I don't think any group that has the levels of mental illness and neurodivergence as this group does would, in any other world, be excluded from services. Do they need special services? Probably only services that are tailored, again, to their mental health needs specifically, which there are lots of those services. We might just need to transition them a little bit to reach incels, especially at home and online. Is it on women? No, I think it's really simple on especially these gendered issues to just want to blame the other group. But I think society is just way more complex than that, and there are multiple factors that play into this. And I think laying this at the feet of women would be it would be the same level of factorial analysis as saying the wage gap is just a gender issue as well. It's just a single factor to predict things when it's multiple things that are creating incels.
Okay, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. We'll get into it in the open. Next up, we have Portland is Burning.
Hey, thank you for having me, Whick. Kevin, Chud, nice to make your acquaintances for the first time. The rest of you, nice to see you again. I do believe that I'm on the same side of this argument as Chud and Erudite insofar as incels do seem to be a marginalized and high-risk group. I think that the two main culprits for the situation are the public school system and the healthcare infrastructure in the United States in particular. the obvious factors contributing to their condition and their inability to find romantic companionship or any level of intimate companionship seem to start much earlier than their identification with the incel label. And I think we need to address the systemic reasons that they fall into these very toxic traps that tend to limit their ability to engage with the rest of the world in a healthy, productive way. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, thanks for being here. And next up, we have Prime Kai.
Hello, all. Nice to see you. But I'm gonna have to pause before I get started with my intro. I just gotta say that I'm freaking out that I'm seeing Chet Logic's face. Oh my God, it's really happening.
It's
This
happening,
is an
mate.
amazing experience.
How'd you feel?
I'll say a long time ago, I told Chud in private that I assumed that he looked like a supermodel. And now that he turns out to be a twin brother of my man Whick here, I was completely and totally vindicated. So I'm just very happy to actually get to see you. So shout out to you, Chud. Okay. So also, Chud has terrible ideas. So I think that this idea that incels are a marginalized group is plainly ridiculous, and I think is an insult to the term, right? The very serious term of marginalized groups. To add them to that is, wow, just really embarrassing, and what I would expect from white people. All right, so I think that. Uh, that this group of individuals, certainly feels oppressed and deserves empathy, right? They're going through an issue, and they deserve empathy and our understanding. But anything beyond that, absolutely not. And I'll elaborate later on. Thanks so much.
Well, okay. We'll see how that goes. Next up, we have Stabby. Please.
I was going to do something else with that definition of marginalized, but now I have to be spicier because Prime Case just comes right out with that. For is there a rise in incels, and if so, what is causing it? No, there is not a rise in incels. Absolutely not. I am so tired of this pressure we're getting from society to see that this is a new problem we all have to run and solve right now, especially considering what incels are saying will fix their problem. There's not a rise in being an incel. There is a rise in the visibility of it because of the internet, but this used to be true. In the ancient world, it used to be more savage. I'll get to that if people push too far. What is the definition we're using for are they a marginalized group? If you want the Oxford definition, then yes, they are peripheral. Now, they're peripheral by choice. They've chosen to be peripheral, usually with the demand that sex is a part of a healthy person, which is true. It is true that a healthy sex life leads to a mentally healthy person as one of the factors that helps us be mentally healthy. But they're pushing themselves into that. Are they oppressed? Absolutely not. They are not oppressed by any group that's trying to oppress them. You could make that claim of the ancient world with harems, sultans, nobility who could get as many women as they wanted, but you can't make that argument now. For what do we do, if anything, and what do we owe incels? I think that every human being on earth owes incels exactly what we owe the rest of humanity. Empathy, trying to help them. We owe them accessible mental health care. We owe them being taught and learning, especially, guys, if you are in healthcare right now, I am begging you, please take some of what you've learned. Don't advise or give therapy to a person, but the way your therapist talked to you to tell you, yes, this is an insurmountable task. This is a huge amount of work, but here's how you're going to do it. And here's how you're worth all of this effort. Please talk to people that way, especially if you're in therapy and you've seen how you've been treated by therapists. Try to not be toxically positive, but say, yes, rejection is normal. I mean, you don't have to tell them to get over it, but oh my God, they get rejected once. The rest of humanity gets rejected a dozen times and we handle it, but the incels lose their minds. So try to use some of those speech that therapists use if you're in therapy yourself. And should women do more to help them? No. Well, like what? Putting us out as a separate group. We already have a burden, and our job was to make sure that we weren't making children with the ones that were going to be violent towards those children, or the ones that were going to, harm us in some way. That's already an evolutionary pressure. Women should not be doing something extra beyond what society itself should be doing for every person.
Okay. Also, we're getting some clicking or something. I'm not sure
Oh
what that's
no.
about or who that's from. But next up, last but not least, first time guest on my show. Hopefully not last time, but we'll see how it goes. Kevin Logan, please.
Yes, hello there. I'm Kevin Logan. You can find me at KFLogan1875 on Twitch. Click. Yeah, I think there are fundamentally two different groups that need to be talked about separately in a sense within this conversation. There are people who are literally involuntary celibate, i.e. can't get laid for whatever reason, and there are a myriad of different things. Those people I have a lot of sympathy for. I'm not going to shit talk them. We've got plenty of example. I mean, me and Chud are both ugly white British bastards. Not getting laid is pretty straightforward. So that's
speak
one
for
thing.
yourself,
But
mate. Jesus.
All right, scuffed Jeremy Corbyn. Calm down, mate. Anyway, you have but then you have incels, the kind of incel trademark, if you will, who are really, frankly, the kind of face of inceldom, I suppose. Who are often misogynistic, violent, nasty creeps who I don't feel fucking sympathy for, and I have a great deal of antipathy toward. And I think the mixing up of those two groups is quite dangerous, and I think the nasty element of the incels hides behind this natural tendency for humans to feel sympathy for actual involuntary celibates. And that, in some sense, is even sicker than just the hatred in of itself, in that they weaponizing other people's issues for their own political, social clout. As to whether they're a marginalized group, that's fucking ridiculous. That isn't a fucking thing. They can be part of marginalized groups. I think neurodivergence has been mentioned a couple of times. Yeah, there are probably a lot of them that are neurodivergent, but they're potentially ostracized because of that neurodivergence. It's not the fact that they can't get their fucking dick wet. That's not the fucking point, is it? They're not marginalized. It is, I think I agree with Prime Kai. It is insulting to actually marginalized groups to try and pretend that this oddly defined group of people who do have some issues are themselves marginal. That's not true. It's just fucking ludicrous.
Okay, well, with that, thank you all for being here. And I would ask, the only thing I ask, try to attack each other's points rather than each other, but otherwise, get as spicy or crazy as you like.
Do you
and
really
again, we'll
believe
open
that
up to
people...
discussion.
Shut up, Whick. Do you really believe that someone is getting rejected once and becoming an incel?
Who is that to me, or?
No. That was Whick's Stabby Pimp, I think is the Discord name. So we'll go with that.
Say that again.
Do you really believe that someone is getting rejected once and becoming an incel? Like, where are you getting that from?
I don't think it's every single time, but I do believe that they are facing the same amounts of rejection as we are, but they're giving up sooner.
Okay.
And I'm getting a lot of it from experiences. I'm in a veteran community, and like as one of the veterans, the insanity is that there's this sense of entitlement for what they're owed. It's not just with sex either. I want to be very clear about that. But that sense of entitlement means they're giving up a lot earlier, way faster than other people are.
I just think that's insane. The idea that, you know, like, I think the reason people go down the path of becoming an incel is not because they get rejected once or a couple of times. There is this really deep-rooted feeling that they aren't good enough, and there's this consistent, persistent rejection that constantly they're engaged with that leads them towards these communities. So I just don't understand where you're getting it, that they're getting rejected one, maybe a couple of times, and boom, they're an incel. I think it's a lot more of a detailed process than that.
So let me ask you.
A process that starts at a really young age too. I feel like we're I feel like, to address Kevin's point really quick, I really want to try to understand which group we're talking about, because if you say there's two separate groups that we both call both of them incels, I don't want to argue about definitions the entire conversation.
Yeah,
so can we kind of just like level the playing field?
I mean, people that want to murder
exactly
people are bad. I mean, can we just get the basic shit out of the way? Obviously, yes. If someone wants to murder someone, that's bad. We can be understanding of why they got there, but that's a line we don't want to cross. So I think it's pretty easy for us all to agree that, right?
Yeah.
And I
think-
want
I
to
think-
Yeah, I
say
don't want
that
to talk
the-
about
can we-
domestic terrorists.
Could I just suggest that we just focus exclusively on incels who would be part of incel groups? They're part of incel Reddits. They usually will self-identify as incels, and so in that way, they're typically part of that actual incel group. They're typically
Well,
part
can
of
I-
this highly misogynistic Reddit and
Well, that-
not
this is-
Reddit anymore. But that
Yeah.
group, right?
Well,
I think
this is
that's
this
the
is
group
what
we're
I
talking
mean is that it's difficult to disambiguate the terrorist element from that, because the support you do see some pretty widespread support, even if
Wait,
it's just memes
what
for
percentage?
people like Elliot
What
Rodger,
percentage?
for instance.
Okay, you
Well,
can
that's-
meme about things
that's
that doesn't
pretty
matter,
significant.
right? The line is, are you actually considering, or are you going to go and kill people? That's the fucking differentiation you make. You can make whatever fucking jokes you want. What are you talking about? Who cares if they're making fucking jokes about?
Well,
Elliot
no, hang
Rodger?
on, but I'm not. Yeah, but I'm not talking about them being. We're not talking here. Should inceldom be illegal? It's should we have sympathy for them? Are they a marginalised group? And therefore, what they joke about actually does matter. Because if you're asking me whether I should feel empathy for a person, well, it depends on how they behave, I guess. Yeah, I think that does matter. I think that should be factored in.
Okay,
I
I
typically, when you look at research on this, so I came armed with lots of research. When you look at things like when you studied a group of incels.io, so it is very strongly self-identified. There's a lot of misogynistic language. This group specifically has been studied by multiple studies because they tend to be open to researchers. And I will be clear, linguistic analysis of these groups show high levels of misogyny, high levels of homophobia. So in all the ways that you would suggest they're probably like the incels that you don't like, this is the group we're talking about. When they were asked questions like, do you admire Elliot Rodger? Do you admire Alec Manessian? It was an overwhelming disagreement with that statement. It was like vastly opposed to this. In fact, when you look into a lot of these incel groups, by and large, violence isn't supported. It does seem to be the radical extreme. And the radical extreme of this group is bad, fucking obviously. But the problem is that you've got an entire body of young men that are identifying as incels, that are black-pilled, that have really toxic ideas, and then you have an extreme form of that group that's doing really, really like schizo crazy shit. And we do have to separate these a little bit because there's a different level of intervention required for different severities.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Okay, so we can all then agree that it doesn't seem to be the case that incels overall are a violent group. There's radical extremes, but the reason is strong, they're not violent.
Yeah, the vast majority of them are just often lonely, disenfranchised guys. Yeah, and I have a lot of sympathy for those people. I've got no problem with those people.
To just put a little extra information into that, a lot of them are teenagers too. A lot of them aren't fully formed adults, right? A lot of the people that we're talking about either get caught in these rabbit holes extremely young, or they are still extremely young and participating in these kinds of conversations on the internet and identifying with these groups. We know from the experience with the radical element of it that a lot of the people who engage in the radical behaviors are people who are largely fresh out of adolescence, post-college age, and are dealing with grievances that they had during their high school year, their high school phase of life. So we need to understand and engage with the fact that this problem starts really, really young. It's really heavily associated with things like bullying, lack of parental oversight, and lack of mental health care at a really young age that causes them to fall down these spirals, villainizing them and stigmatizing them to an extreme degree as an entire group exacerbates this problem instead of addressing the issues that create it.
If I may interject just real quick, the reason I asked this question, right? Are they a marginalized group? Is touching on what Portland just said right there. Is it seems to be, right, that when we can label someone as an incel, or whether they label themselves as an incel, it becomes okay to treat them in ways that it is not okay to treat people normally, that we would not treat them in these ways otherwise, unless we can consider them an incel or an involuntary celibate and things like that. So I don't think it's necessarily ridiculous to ask this question of whether or not they are being marginalized, because a lot of the reasons they become incels, at least self-reportedly, is because of the way society treats them. So I guess I'd ask to the panel here, in what ways can society treat young men? In what ways? I'll guess it's a two-part question, okay? And I see your hand. So the first part of the question is, in what ways are young men is the ways that society is treating young men leading young men to being incels? And second of all, what are some ways that we can change this behavior, or do we even want to, right? Like some groups should be marginalized. Nazis should be marginalized, things like that. These groups should be marginalized. Is incel a group we actually want to marginalize? Erudite and then Stabby.
Sure. So I'll just again talk to you guys about the evidence because you three are fucking wrong and all of the science shows it. So I'll just walk you through and then maybe we can actually end this debate early. Unless you want a science data, and then we can do that. So from articles, Mayer, we've got articles written by Costello and an article written by Milisenko and team, all outline that when you look at the incel research, there's a paucity of literature because every single study done into the incel ideology has been biased, it's been linguistic analysis, and it's assumed that these groups are homophobic, all of these things, and that they're not marginalized. And all they did in their research was to look at whether or not they were misogynistic and hateful groups and never actually considered whether there's any actual systemic issues, oppression, or any of the claims that incels create. So since then, in 2022, 2 articles have come out that are actually taking incel claims seriously and looking at what are the demographics of men that are incels, what are their actual experiences, and what do they bring to the table? Who are these people? 2 studies. So we have about 357 data points in total. I know this, I've looked at all of the literature. What the literature shows you is that these men are disproportionately neurodivergent. They're disproportionately depressed at a 4 times level the national average. They're 4 times level anxious.
Is this funny, Prime? Is this funny to you? Why the fuck are you
Yeah,
laughing?
no, it's fucking hilarious. It's fucking hilarious. Yeah, it is fucking hilarious.
I tell you what, why don't you read off some fucking stats about black people and laugh at that? How about that?
I'm waiting.
Sure. I'm not rude
You're
like you.
interrupting her. Why?
Erudite, yeah, I was going to let Erudite finish. I didn't say anything. That was Chud.
Sure.
But I think it's
Their
funny.
suicide rates are astronomical. Their suicide ideation rates are so robust that if you go into the threads, they have active, if I was rating these on suicide risk assessment scales, if you read what these people are saying in threads about their own plan to kill themselves, I would rate them all at medium to high risk, if not extreme at some points. These groups are underserved. 50% of them report going to therapy. 10% report having successful experiences within therapy. Compared to the national average, 98% of people who go to therapy experience some level of benefit. So these men are vastly underserved, probably because there's a mixture of neurodivergence, mental illness, also, by the way, high levels of childhood abuse and trauma, and bullying. These groups are astronomical on all of these metrics. And if any hold on. If any other group had these numbers, you wouldn't for a second be laughing at me, and it is gross that you are.
Oh, sorry. Don't do that with me. I'm sorry. That's not going to work with me. Okay. Trust me. You're not going to shame me with this shit, right? But I'll wait.
Absolutely right. That if we were making the same dismissive statements about any other group that you consider marginalized for a lot of the same reasons, you would be disgusted by it. Sorry.
What dismissive statements? What dismissive statements? First of all. Second of all, no, I am not arguing
that all white, of course, it's a bunch of white people making this argument.
It is a bunch of white people. I don't know. It is. I don't know.
Okay, so that was one dismissive. Okay, name a dismissive statement I fucking made. I'll wait.
I don't actually have. I think you've said that they're not oppressed. I think the only thing that
I don't think they're oppressed. I'm sorry. They are definitely not oppressed.
It's been mostly Prime and Kevin who have been dismissive of them.
You're the only one I'm engaged with the definition of a marginalized.
Portland, we gotta let Stabby in. Okay, Portland, we gotta let Stabby, and then we gotta let Prime. And that's the order we're going to go. And Kevin's been addressed, so we're going to let Kevin respond as well.
I'm going to stick
to what the online groups are saying. I agree with us that we should not be talking about the group that it just didn't get sex since last Wednesday. And we should not be talking about the group that is murdering everybody. We should be talking about the online group and what they're saying is a solution. And what they're saying is a solution is sex. And they are 100% wrong.
You were the one that was saying an incel is someone that got ejected once. You're the fucking retarded one that said that first of all. You're the one that brought that into the conversation.
No, I'm the one who just now said that I am agreeing to this particular definition and the ones we're talking about. The ones we're talking about are the ones who are online saying that sex will cure this. So settle down, sweetie.
Hold on. Okay, you're understanding how we typically approach mental health treatment research. Typically, when we're looking at a group that's highly mentally ill, we don't go to them and say, what do you need to treat your problem? Because guess what? If they knew the answer, they would have solved it.
I know.
What you do instead is you go, how are you feeling? That's the most important study from this. And then from that, Researchers discover what methods are going to be effective for
Welcome
treating these
to
people
Chud
and
Nation.
implementing it.
An
For example,
anonymous
this is
user
why, for
gifted a
example,
tier 1
AA,
sub
which
to
is developed and
Retarded.
funded by mostly addicts originally, doesn't have a super high success rate because AA isn't nearly as a successful method of treating addiction, even though it was created by addicts, as something like behavioral contingency management plans, which are created by researchers. So I don't care what incels say will solve their problem. I care about the fact that they are marginalized.
I do think that they are peripheral. I 100% agree that they are peripheral. I also think that they are often self-selecting for this, first of all. Second of all, I am aware it is a mental health crisis. Incels, what people should be asking of these panels, we're asking ourselves, the ones who are not having these problems. We are not asking incels why they are resistant to affordable and accessible mental health care. Why are they resistant to
They're
these
not.
programs? They call it wokeism. They're against wokeism. They're against
50% of them get
socialism.
therapy.
They're against.
Wait, 50% of them get therapy.
We need.
In what
Okay.
world are they resistant to treatment? The problem is that therapy is typically
Yeah, we're talking about the
ineffective for them.
online. We're talking about the
Yeah, but
online people, like the quartering.
I am.
Wait, why are
I'm
we talking about the
using
quartering, you
research
fucking
from-
moron? You think the quartering's an
I'm-
incel?
I'm-
What the fuck are you on
No,
about?
no. Like the odd thing, no. Like what they're going for, like the ones who are online who are talking about incels, like what the
Yeah,
quartering.
because that's
is
all
saying.
they've got, because
Like, what
lefties don't
this
say fucking good
quartering-
stuff about it. Lefties say retarded shit like you do, and that's why they fucking go to
There's
the
a
quartering,
lefty.
because that's all they've got.
There's a lefty. You need to settle down just a little bit. There is a lefty.
You need to
who's
stop being
saying that
fucking
they cannot
retarded.
No, stop. Is there a lefty saying? I want you to answer this right now, if you can even understand the question. Is there a leftist
I'll do my best.
saying that they cannot have mental health care? Find me the lefty who's saying this. Find him now. Go. Shoo, you have a job. Let's see it.
Okay, this is not about the mental health care thing. What I'm pointing out to you is you're complaining they're watching the quartering.
Is
But
there
the
a lefty?
quartering-
Is there
Listen,
a leftist?
shut the fuck up,
Fucking
okay?
answer
Your
me.
question's
Is there a
totally
leftist
irrelevant.
Why,
who is
The
why,
question's
saying that
why
fucking
are you
irrelevant.
asking that
Healthcare?
question?
The question's
Who's ever
irrelevant.
claimed that?
What I'm pointing out to you is the reason people are
You
going
guys
to
are
the
saying that we're
quartering.
dismissing their right to health care.
I'm
No,
no, we're
who
dismissing
said?
them.
I'm
as
addressing
I'm
a
talking
your
to
point you
group.
just
I'm
made.
talking to
Dismissing
Chud
them.
Logic.
I'm addressing your point you
Chud.
just made. You said they're going to watch
You
the
just
quartering, and
said.
listen. I know you're a fucking woman and you find it difficult to understand a man's talking, okay? But shut the fuck up and listen, okay? It's really simple. The reason they're going to watch people at the
I do
quartering
your male
is
job
that's
better than
all
you,
they've
Steve.
fucking got to
You're like a
offer.
girl.
We don't offer anything to them, and often we're very dismissive. So of course they're going to go to people that are talking about concerns that are relevant to them, and often they're feeding their heads for the bullshit. So I agree. but
Who
we
is
should-
telling them that they cannot have health care? Tell me one person who's telling
But I
them
don't
that.
think
You
it's about
can't.
who. But
They don't
you're
have
asking this
healthcare. It's
question.
not
This is
about
fucking
someone
irrelevant.
saying they can't.
This is a
It's
totally
they
irrelevant
don't.
point. The point I'm making is that when lefties talk about this, they're often they're derisive and dismissive of these issues, and it means that they're pushed to red pill communities is probably the better example, right? They're pushed to red pill communities, and they end up getting their heads filled with bullshit because the left sometimes are a bit averse to giving advice or recommendations or guidance, and either will, say, it's your own fault, you're a man,
I'm
or
averse. No,
Let me give a different
I'm
example.
averse. Wait,
of
can I say something
systematic.
really quickly? I'm averse to
Sure.
toxic positivity. Okay, I'm averse to toxic positivity. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you're trying to talk about what your struggles are right now, and your friend goes, "Yeah, well, that's life," and blah 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 blah. They're not trying to be dismissive or cruel. They don't have anything else that they can give you. They aren't telling you, like therapists tell you, this is an insurmountable task, but you are worth the labor you will put into it. We don't have that language. And so when somebody tells you, yeah, that sucks, they'll either do one of two really damaging things: talk about the time they were struggling and how they're fine, or talk about, yeah, this is normal, this is life, and be incredibly unhelpful. That's
Okay,
it. That's the
wait.
problem I'm seeing.
Can I
And it happens
address-
to
Can I
everyone.
give you a comparison group? Okay, if we want to talk about marginalized groups and mental health care, that's something that I know a lot about. So like if you don't mind, I want to make a comparison. Nobody would sit down and tell an indigenous person that there isn't marginalization and systemic problems in the mental health care delivery and say it by saying nobody's telling you not to go get therapy. Of course people are saying indigenous people could go get therapy. The issue is that typically therapists who treat them are white and have no understanding of their culture, and so there's massive cultural gaps that the client has to basically catch their therapist up on to even understand their worldview. There's also a lot of systemic stuff. For example, they might not feel comfortable with a white counselor or the institution itself because they've been actively harmed by this institution for a long time. When you look, for example, at incels, it is obviously not the level of oppression that indigenous people have experienced, but they report very similar struggles. For example, their therapist typically is a woman who has no conception of their experience or the culture or the problems that they're coming from. And the humanities as an institution itself is deeply biased and hateful against these groups. And this is shown in the literature. It is shown in the research that's being done on these groups. So, of course, they're having a hard time finding good therapists. Their therapists don't understand their issues because most therapists are women who don't understand incels and feel uncomfortable with them, which is fucking fair, by the way. And also, the actual institution itself doesn't care about this group and is actively villainizing them within research itself.
Okay, I do want to give other people a chance to get
Can I-
into. I've been waiting. Kevin, I know you
Yeah.
are. Prime, then you will go exactly after that. So Prime will get a chance to speak, and then you, Kevin, can respond as well.
I'm
And
listening.
Kevin, if you have a camera, I can't see you if you're raising your hand. That's the issue.
No, that's fine. Because my camera's through my OBS, so it can't go through the Discord. Sorry.
It's all good. Okay, so Prime, then Kevin, and then we'll get other people on here. So.
You could just turn off your camera in OBS, and then you can use the Discord and then capture.
I know I fucking can. I know I can. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just wanted to.
I'm only playing. You're all right.
Okay. So I'm glad that our friend Erudite gave us that data about like the group of like incels and like what they experience and the I guess the various ways in which they face mental health troubles, right? So it's useful to mention, a lot of these people are neurodivergent, right? There's a high population of divergent individuals. Okay, great. That's something I can work with. Right? Like a neurodivergency, the people who are neurodivergent are within a marginalized group, I think. I think we can look at that and address that separately. When we make incels into a quote-unquote marginalized group, that implies they need some sort of special treatment, that there is something beyond simply providing great mental health care and support and counseling that society needs to do, right? And as we do with other marginalized groups, right? We listen to them. We listen to them, and we take their wants seriously, right? I mean, if we want to create a more equal society, what incels are asking of us is plainly ridiculous, right? That's what Stabby is trying to get to. That.
What are incels asking for? Enlighten us.
Sure. Okay. Well, there are plenty of incels who are asking for equal access to female genitalia.
Okay, right? How many are asking for that? What data have you got to back that up?
Brain cells.
Going into incel
brain cells.
And,
what?
Looking at going
right.
into
okay.
This is the problem. Is like making their desire for and inability to find companionship sound like this ridiculous, insane straw man list of requests based on a few online memes.
That's not like a few online memes. And beyond that, right? Like that, and if it's not, well, then great. Then that works for my point any which way, right? So even if it's not,
listen, mate. Listen,
and there's literally no reason. There is no, I won't listen to you because I'm fucking talking, Chud. Don't you understand that? See, I'm a man, so don't try and interrupt me. Thank you.
I never speak over a marginalized voice. Go on.
Yeah, of course. I like Chud.
Yeah, we're British anyway, the ultimate people of colour. Let's go.
So, if they're not asking for anything in particular, then another reason not to pay attention to them as a quote-unquote marginalized group, right? Marginalized group, I think, is something that that term is something that has meaning and weight in our society, and it's being cheapened by this idea that this group is being oppressed by who exactly? Is it by women? I don't think anyone here would agree with that, right? Is it by society? Well, society, maybe you can make a case for that, but society is treating them like that because of their neurodivergent behavior instead of being understanding for them. We started off this conversation by saying we should be understanding to them. We should be empathetic to these individuals, as we should with anyone. Right? But to say that they are some sort of marginalized group that deserves any support of special attention, right, beyond the U.S. In case where I'm coming from, or where the U.S. building out its mental health care industry and giving better access to that is plainly fucking ridiculous.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to
but
quickly
Prime,
say
that
to
sounds
respond, because listen, Prime, I see where you're coming from. I guess my concern is that I worry that what we're doing is we're engaging in essentially the online meme of the worst of what an incel is, state-mandated girlfriends, right? Like, of course, there's people out there that are saying shit like that. But, I mean, I don't know the data in any way near as notsoerudite does. But I would be surprised if that would be a preponderance of incels that are saying we need state-mandated girlfriends. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that there's probably more realistic things that people have got in mind that they're actually looking for. I agree that I think the healthcare thing is, of course, a fantastic thing, to look towards. But for me, it's like, well, what's the in-between? Because America's not going to have state healthcare anytime soon. So is there anything that can be done in the meantime? And my perspective is there anything the left can do to promote ideas that are going to help these people and give them something to bite into so they don't end up listening to the red pill shit and going down a totally crazy path?
It seems, though, that all your advice can be copy and pasted just for neurodivergent people in general, or people who are depressed, right? We should have more.
There's more complicated things going on. Like I agree. People. Okay, what about where race and neurodivergency intersects? So you've got, say, an Indian man who's autistic, right? I think that's a very unique intersection. Indian men are perceived in a very negative way in the dating market. If you're also neurodivergent, that creates an intersection of basically hopelessness. The Bobs and Virginia have basically ruined dating for Indian men for a generation. I'm memeing a bit, but in all seriousness, yeah, there's a very negative perception. Add neurodiversity on top, it just seems like there's an intersection that seems almost insurmountable. And how do we deal with that? I don't even know if I've got the answer, but I just think there's a lot more complexity to this than just a couple of dudes asking for state-mandated girlfriends.
Chud's actually hitting on like a really, really important part of this conversation too, is like the need to bifurcate between how we address the incel population that we have now and how we proactively like improve the trajectory of our population so we don't have more and more people identifying with these groups over time and a larger share of the population, because obviously it's a growing problem. I think to say it's not a growing problem is a silly dismissal of the isolation and increased atomization of online culture. We know that this is a unique and increasingly problematic part of the way we engage with social media and the way we engage with technology, and that COVID made it a lot worse. So we need to engage with both parts of that conversation.
We need to let other people in here a little bit, right? Kevin's been waiting. You gotta let Kevin in. Kevin,
get your camera, bruh. I don't know what to tell you. Put your hand up.
True. Well, no, I don't mind waiting. It's not a problem. I was going to just address a couple of points that I think notsoerudite was making, and I think your studies sound really interesting. If you could send those to me, that would actually be quite interesting to read, I think. But within what you were saying, I think is the interesting point that whether it be neurodivergence or mental illness or any of the other factors, those are the things for which those people would be parts of oppressed groups. Inceldom in of itself isn't a cohesive enough social or political grouping to be considered an oppressed group as far as I'm concerned. I think what you're doing is bringing in these disparate factors to inceldom within the individual incel and saying that it's the inceldom that's part of the marginalization, which I don't think is
one question,
necessarily
Kevin?
True. Yeah, question, yeah.
Sure.
How many terms for groups do we use and adopt as pejoratives in cultural parlance? Like incel is used as an insult, and it's got a cultural connotation that it must be a bad and undesirable state. And obviously it is. I don't think people identify with. So isn't there a certain level of cultural oppression that happens immediately as a consequence of adopting a term that identifies a group of people as an insult?
Social I don't know that oppression. Like, there's a difference. I think a fundamental, substantive difference between being mocked and being oppressed. And I think actually the second point I was going to make to what Erudite was saying, the comparison to indigenous people, and I accept that they were saying that clearly indigenous people are more marginalised and more oppressed. So I'm not trying to equivocate, but I think the comparison is apt in one respect, that there were specific laws enacted against indigenous people. There was genocide enacted against indigenous people. There is not genocide.
Oppression.
Yeah,
there's
not
systematic oppression. But
there's not genocide. No one's going around stealing the land and killing and burning the settlements.
You are equivocating now because you just granted me that it's not equivocal, and now you're equivocating. Obviously, I don't believe
No,
that
I'm
incels
expanding upon the point.
hold on. No, obviously, I don't believe that incels experience systematic oppression like Black people have, Indigenous people have, like women have historically. I would fully
Okay.
grant you that. I would never argue for that. However, I think we can all agree that systemic oppression is seedy, tricky to hard put your finger on, and has a lot more to do with kind of the human variable within policymakers. It's when all of the policies and ceilings and all of the systematic structure looks the same, and yet white people still tell Black people that their hair isn't okay, and so they're not getting hired because of their hairstyle or their name on their resume, right? This is more of this systemic oppression that's harder to put your finger on. And so what I would counter with that is I would like to ask you a question. If in this incel data, 54% have a formal diagnosis, but only 6% of them have actually found psychotherapy helpful, compared to a 20% average formal diagnosis for the Gen Pop and a 75% success from psychotherapy, what do you think is happening there?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Exactly. And so that's where I'm
Yeah.
saying there's got to be, I can tell you what's happening because I've also looked through the literature and we've seen robust bias in research alone on incels, to the point that multiple papers that I've cited you, the 3 that I listed, talk about other papers and basically say, like, there's a lot of research bias going into this. While we acknowledge that there are harmful ideas within incel groups, nobody has actually looked at any
But
of
is
the incel questions
yeah.
seriously.
Well,
within
what
the
I would
data.
well, this is I think part of the problem is that, again, going back to, I think, the concept of it not being a cohesive enough group, that I don't think a lot of people find it worth studying because it's not as big an issue as maybe a lot of other things. Like, it seems like not a waste of time, clearly, but
Sure. But
but
we thought that addicts were a waste of time like 20 years ago, and we were just wrong, right? And so it's like, when if a guy walks in to a treatment center and he meets with a therapist and he sits down across from this nice young lady, how does he even begin to try to tell his therapist what his experience is? And assume he's got all of the hateful ideas as well, and he's bought into them, but he's aware that everyone else thinks that he's a piece of shit for having these ideas. Where does he even start? How does the therapist work with him? How does she stay safe and comfortable? Right? This is this systemic stuff that I'm talking about, where it's that human variability of course they can
this is
access therapy, but the issue is 6% find therapy helpful. That's
and this
the
is
problem.
well, this is part of the problem with why I try to delineate between two groups, and of course, it's more complicated than just two. Maybe you could do it to 10 groups or 20 groups or 50. It's
Yeah.
a huge
Yeah.
group of people. But the problem is,
Please
there's a
don't.
difference between just not getting laid, i.e., literally being involuntarily celibate, and taking on political, socio-economic positions and
Yes. So the
living
group
a
I'm talking
lifestyle.
about, the group I'm talking about has taken on those
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
ideologies. They have a
yeah,
strong love of ideology. In fact, if you
yeah.
want a really uncomfortable intersection to talk about Prime's point of, it sounds like it's just kind of autism, why don't we just deal with the autism? You want to know a really uncomfortable truth about incel data? The people who are most radical and most violent have an intersection of being both an incel and neurodivergent. Typically, if you remove neurodivergent, you have a stronger association with the ideology, but almost none of the violent radical positions or intentions. So you cannot look at me and say we should just treat them like autism, because we're dealing with people with autism and neurodivergence. In this case, the neurodivergence is exclusively autism in the article, and highly radical violent tendencies. The reality is that this intersection does require a
Wait a
different
minute. I thought
response.
we eliminated that group. I thought at the start we eliminated that group, the violent ones.
This is why I said this is the uncomfortable thing, because you said I just want to treat autism. It sounds like just an autism
But
problem, and I'm
it seems
saying
no.
the treatment
But
that
you
you would
said
give an
specifically
autistic person
that
would
we
be
would not
insufficient.
deal
Lobotomies
with
for the
that.
autists.
If we're breaking them in, okay, then we can, right? And then I think that only strengthens our point. But like, you guys specifically didn't want to talk about the violent ones. We're talking about the non-violent ones, right? So
Why
like,
don't you engage with my point rather than doing whatever this
hold
is?
on, no, wait, hey, I'm literally working with your point, right? The
No,
point you
you're
said
not.
20
The
minutes
point-
ago, right?
No,
So like I'm saying,
no.
are we bringing that group in to this conversation? I would
Why?
love to.
Okay,
We
hold
can
on.
do that.
I would as
But
well.
Why
if
am I
not,
bringing in the
no,
group?
don't
Why
try
am I
to
bringing
have
in
it
the
both
group?
ways.
No. Why am I thinking about the group? Because you brought up autism, and you said it sounds like it's just
You
an
brought up
autism
autism.
problem. No, you brought it up when you
No,
said
I
if
brought
it's
up neurodivergence
okay,
because
stop
I
and
said,
listen,
oh no, I
stop and
said,
listen,
no,
stop
excuse
and
me,
listen, stop.
Guys,
I brought
it's a
up
Twitch
neurodivergence.
panel. There's a
Wait,
lot of.
hey, all of you.
writing down
All
your
of you.
statement.
All
Venus,
of you.
Venus, Venus,
I
Venus,
want
all of
you
you.
Venus,
to
Venus,
Wait,
even
take
write
control.
down because
Take
it's fine.
control of the
I
autism.
did.
Venus, Venus,
Take
I
control of the
did write
autism.
Here, I will
this
help
down.
all of you.
Men
I'll
not
help
knowing
all
their
of you.
place.
What
will help.
happened?
I will help all of you. You have to
Venus,
stop.
Venus, Venus,
All,
Venus,
yeah,
Venus.
yeah. You two. Okay, one at a time. Erudite, finish your point. Then Prime can respond, and then we'll move on. I will unmute you now. Okay, thank you.
If we want to get into the meta conversation, the reason why autism was ever brought up was originally because I outlined that neurodivergence was an issue. You responded by saying, if the neurodivergence is there, maybe I'll just pull up your quote since you're rolling your eyes. You said there's a high amount of ND, and that's fine. These folks are most likely going to need interventions, but I can't see it being beyond something that we would intervene with autism. And so, what I'm saying is, to the intersectional point, if you want to talk about the autistic people, we're actually talking about that extreme group that we already, for the most part, excluded. Because if you so, like, your whole argument is, why don't we just treat the mental health problem? Why is it even an incel related issue? And I'm saying it's an incel related issue because of this intersection. Here's one example. Neurodivergent people who are also incels are the most likely to be radical and violent.
Okay, Prime, you can respond.
Sure, right. I was simply saying that I didn't bring up autism. I didn't say autism previously. I said neurodivergency, right? And I gave you credit for bringing in all those ways in which incels intersect with mental health complexes. So I didn't bring that up, right? So I didn't say that. So, but you corrected yourself afterwards. You corrected yourself later on, and you used neurodivergence. Okay, great. And we can, again, it's fine if we bring in that group. It's just that we had specifically removed that group before, but we can bring that in now. That's fine. Okay, sure, whatever. I think that so a friend, sorry, Chud. Yes, our friend Chud had brought in, specifically he brought up an Indian autistic like individual, right, and talked about like how that might complicate things, right, and which is interesting because it brought back a memory I read of an article a long time ago of a person who like fits exactly what he was describing, right. And I think this was before the term incel became like, part of the zeitgeist, but it was describing a person having that kind of trouble. And that he was having a hard time dating, and he kept trying. I remember, like, I think I teared up reading an article because it was like, like I was really rooting for him, but he was just having so much trouble relating to other people. Right? That seems like a person who needs some sort of intervention, but like I think that intervention is already being provided. Like it's not as if autistic people are a new thing, right? The idea of incels, right, in popular culture is a new thing. But autistic individuals having trouble in the dating world is not new. We have resources for that. We have resources to tackle that.
Do you think that's sufficient?
And I want, what do I think it's
the resources that we give to people, right?
No, I can already answer
do you
that.
think
No.
they're okay?
Of course
so
not.
No. So you would be okay
Yeah.
with society making some changes to
Dude.
give special consideration, if we want to use that word.
No, I didn't say
to-
that. Don't add that to me. I didn't say that at all. I said the resources that are available are not sufficient, right? What are those resources? Mental health, to have a mental health apparatus that can deal with the myriad issues that people are facing within our society, right? I would like to build that out as a socialist, right? Who's talked about it many times in the stream. You know that, right? I've already said I want to vastly expand the mental health industry here in the States. So yeah, we don't have enough resources available, but I'm not asking for some sort of special treatment for this one particular group, which is not marginalized. And I guess the final thing I'll say, because I'm taking up a lot of time here, is that like I don't believe that okay, you know what? Let me get back to that because it's gonna be a longer conversation with Erudite, so I'll wait. Okay.
I would love to respond. So I would fully grant you that we need more resources, particularly in America where there's not a lot of free mental health resources. I'll just grant you this. I will push back on the intersection. Say I have a client, right? Say I'm doing research study and I have a group of people. Let's say let's just call them purple people. So they're just a distinctive group. We do a bunch of research. A lot of them are getting therapy, but they are saying that therapy is helpful to them at a 12 times lower rate than the general population. Do you think that maybe as therapists, for example, and as a field, we should maybe figure out what's going on in this purple group to figure out why the same services are vastly under helpful for the purple group?
Absolutely. In fact, I disagreed with Kevin. What Kevin said previously. I think it's absolutely worth investigating this because we don't know. Like I agreed with your point
Whoa,
about
time out.
addicts.
Time out. I did not say that. I said exactly the opposite of that. I said
Well,
people
that
should
was
look
your
into
initial
it.
statement, and then you changed it later on, which is fine. But like,
No, hang on. Whoa. No, I didn't. At what point did I say don't bother looking
Trouble
into
in
this?
paradise.
Well,
Trouble in
anyway, in
paradise.
any case, I agreed with Erudite in her response that like I think that we should be investigating this group, but we should be investigating a lot more groups, right? And maybe there is something more to that. So I'm always for more research. So yeah.
Yeah. So in the case of Indigenous people, we found kind of similar trends where we were really underserving them because most white therapists had no idea. For example, like the concept of family, when you talk about Indigenous people, is a very different concept than it is for like a nuclear white family. And so what happened is a whole bunch of therapists got trained in the culture. There was incentivizations for people within that culture to get trained as well. And now we deliver services that are culturally sensitive and it's based. It seems to be much more effective and people have a much better experience. This is all I'm advocating for. Right now, there isn't a therapist who understands the worldview and experience of an incel. I think it
Okay,
is.
so that's two different things, though, right? And so like I can sign up on providing better care, right? Like let's do that, right? To study a problem and then tackle that problem, right? But when it comes to calling them a marginalized group and implying that and equating them in any sort of way with like actual marginalized groups, right? What we're seeing simply is mostly at the very least is an expression of neurodivergency, right? Of a unique expression of neurodivergency. I don't think that that works out.
I got to ask you a couple of questions. So, like, how are you defining marginalized group? Because I think, literally speaking, it just means a peripheral group that's regarded as unimportant by society. So, like, how are you defining it that's exclusive to this, like, that excludes incels from that definition?
Sure, we can look at Wikipedia. Social exclusion, like social exclusion for marginalized groups, is a process in which individuals are blocked from or denied full access to various rights, opportunities, and resources that are normally available to members of a different group, and which are fundamental to societal integration and observance of human rights within that particular group, e.g., housing, employment, healthcare, civic engagement, that type of stuff. Okay, great. So that would include neurodivergent individuals. That definition, that short definition I gave you, would include neurodivergent individuals. They are blocked from a whole list of things in society, right? It's very made difficult for them to access that, right? My problem with incels is that, like, it seems like they are looking at a Venn diagram. They virtually completely overlap with a neurodivergent people who simply don't take that title. And like, if we say they're a marginalized group, that implies a societal response that is focused on like the heart of the identity rather than like the heart of the issue, right? So the heart of the identity. So let me explain what that is, because I'm sure it wasn't clear. But the heart of the identity being like people who lack access to sex, right? That implies a policy prescription that deals with that, right? Rather than simply including them in neurodivergent, right? Which is a hard.
But you're doing the thing again when you say.
Can I just ask the question?
State humanity girlfriends. Sorry, go on, Kevin. You haven't spoken. Go on.
Okay, just I'll let you go, Kevin. Just real quick, housekeeping here. I'll let you go, but then we got to get Stabby in here.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask a quick question. I suppose to everyone, but mainly to Prime Kai. Do you think it sounds almost like what you're saying, and I don't think I agree with this at all. Do you think that the incel nature of these people is an outcrop or a symptom of their neurodivergence?
I think it's a possibility. I think. I think it's for some of these individuals, right? Because not all of them, I think, we would consider neurodivergent, right? So, yeah, I think
70% are not neurodivergent. Just to be clear.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. Like, it doesn't.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
70% are not neurodivergent.
Yeah. Okay.
That we know
exactly.
of. Rough numbers, obviously.
So I think for some of these individuals, that's certainly the case, right? And then for others, then it's even worse for this other group because they're not neurodivergent. Okay. All right. Well, I'm willing to study the problem as to what the issue is, but I have not seen anything evidence that tells me that these individuals are oppressed systemically in a way that matches any other marginalized group, right? And there's like not just race as a marginalized group, right? There are other social.
There are definitely structures in society that have an oppressive effect on men, and like dating apps, for example, is probably one example of that. Dating apps are skewed very heavily against men, and the way that algorithm works.
Group? Are men a marginalized group?
No, but I'm just pointing out where there's a dynamic that exists where the deck is stacked against men when it comes. If you look at all the information and research about it, because of the fact there's so many men on there, because of the way the algorithm works, particularly certain types of men that aren't conventionally attractive, men that aren't white as well, all comes into it. And I think the problem is we're looking at this from the perspective of like men or incel, but I think it's all intersectional, right? If you want to use the fucking correct language, it's the intersections that are important, right? Like, if you're a good-looking guy, you're probably going to do fine on a dating app. If you're a neurodivergent Indian guy, you're probably ugly. You're going to get fucked, and not in the good way.
But you helped make my point for me. Thank you for that, right? Because that is a disadvantage that I, as a man, right? I'm not one of the super chads. I think maybe you guys might have guessed that, right? I don't have a lot of luck on dating apps, right? But I would not call myself oppressed specifically because of that. And so even when Erudite tells us about individuals who are within the incel group who are having trouble finding a proper a therapist to deal with their issue, right? That in itself does not tell me that they are a marginalized group. They are simply facing a disadvantage, right? And something we should definitely tackle, right? Like we should expand access to healthcare in general. But that doesn't mean that they are a marginalized group. Okay, now I'm done. Stabby?
Stabby. Unfortunate. Nope, still can't hear you. While she's fixing that, right? I do want to ask Prime Kai specifically, do you think that did we get it back? No. Try again, Stabby.
Start talking.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. Okay, continue, please.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, the kids came in, and when I moved these, I kind of got it a little bit out, and I'm an old, so.
Well, that's what you get for fucking breeding. Outrageous.
I know. I am a breeder. So I want to lean this towards Erudite and what Portland is Burning was saying earlier. I did want to ask earlier, but I was afraid that it would seem rude or dismissive. But I'm asking this in complete sincerity. What is making this particular group of men so resistant to the things that are helping other people? Why is this particular group resistant to the same kinds of care? Are we, like, obviously, if a certain kind of treatment isn't working for like a medical patient, we use a different kind of treatment. What is it about this 18 to 25 age group not getting sex that is making them so resistant to help? What's going on?
I mean, it's probably a really layered set of social conditions that produce that kind of behavior a lot earlier than 18 to 25 and start a lot earlier in the like pubescent developmental process. I think that young men in particular start dealing with identity, anxiousness, and fear of rejection and stuff pretty much immediately as they start entering the dating pool in probably age 13 or 14. And once you start like feeling like you're falling behind, speaking from experience, I think that once you start to feel like you're falling behind the pace of your peer group around that age, there can be a lot of social pressures that exacerbate already bad tendencies and create an increasingly desperate sense of isolation that leads to these conditions being a lot worse once we start to identify them as incels in like the 16 to 25 group.
Why are black people so resistant to programs that help other black people?
Hold on. Like, I'm not trying to ask for, I'm trying to get a baseline. And the reason I'm trying to get a baseline for this is because I do think that some of it does have some overlap with things that like, there's a lot of female positivity. There's a lot of feminist, let's go, let's support one another, sisters helping sisters type of stuff. And as much as it's cringe and we all want to like kind of ignore that stuff sometimes, I think that there are some of these problems that have a complete lack of assistance and help from men. I would like to point out that fear of rejection, like so many times I was saying, like Erudite was saying that they might not have a therapist that understands what they're going through or who has been through what they've been through. I said earlier on another site today that Jordan Peterson, this being his actual field of expertise, him saying this is the kinds of therapy that can help you, this is where that we can help you here, like that would go a long, long way. And that was pushed against, viciously pushed.
Isn't therapy very expensive and hard to access in the United States? I mean, I hear all the time about how bad healthcare is. Well, maybe that's the problem. I don't know, just shooting in the dark.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was just gonna. Can I just respond to? I mean, I think you were being a bit memey with the why don't black people access services X, Y, and Z thing. But there's a truth to it, and the point is there's a difference. This goes back to the point I was making about Indigenous people as well. There are specific laws that were laid down in place that have that long-lasting societal effect that mean that black people are marginalised or that Indigenous people are marginalised, etc. That don't exist for just incels. And so I think to compare why black people don't respond societally in one way and why incels don't respond societally in that same way is a completely apples and oranges situation.
Not really, because the point I'm making when I say that is obviously there's good reasons why we would not make these arguments for, say, black people, because there's a lack of access to things. You know, there's a lot of issues and a lot of structural issues.
Yeah, because they're actually marginalised, because they're actually oppressed.
But what I'm pointing out is we're talking about the need for healthcare, and yeah, we can all just go, get healthcare tomorrow. Yeah, that'd be based. Obviously, that would benefit a lot of people. But the point I'm making is that the reason for this resistance is I think also because there's a lack of access and availability for resources that are going to help these people. One of the biggest ones being mental health care, from what I understand in America, is very hard to come by and it's very expensive. You know,
that is true.
And
yes,
I think
not massively.
If I can finish it. No. If I can
ask
finish
a question?
Okay, so finish, and then Erudite, you can ask your questions. Finish your statement, Stabby, and then Erudite question right after.
One of the things that popped up in that other conversation in that other server is mockery. And I think that timeline, that social peer pressure, that fear of rejection, a fear of impending isolation, a lot of it is coming from other men. I've seen it in the incel communities themselves. Like, you're never going to get laid. Oh, yeah, it's because you don't have a millimeter of bone. You might as well just kill yourself, but make sure you go to a school first. Like, I've seen these things happening, and there is a decided lack of care and help from their own male peer groups. Like, that's one of the things that we could start to do in the interim. If men could stop being all like, "Oh, you struck out, loser!" Like, fuck off, stop it.
I absolutely agree with this, and I think there's definitely a spiral that people get into, and they get into these black pill communities. Before you know it, they're talking about killing themselves because they don't have a fucking right chin structure, and that's fucked. But I think the problem is that there are pathways with which they can stop themselves from getting there, but often it's provided by people that I'm sure we'd all agree we don't want them going to. You know, I don't want some fucking guy who's having trouble getting laid going to listen to some red pill shit and getting a bunch of bullshit pumped into their head, you know? I think the problem is the pathways they go down are ones that we'd all agree are probably, you know, leading to further bad ideas being perpetuated. So, yeah, I think there needs to be an alternative.
Radicalization.
Okay,
Yeah,
I want to give Chud finish, but
Sure.
then Erudite has her question, and then
all I was going to say
Kevin
very
can
quick.
respond.
All I was going to say very quickly is in the media landscape. I can't control healthcare. I can't get healthcare sorted. But it's just that I think in the media landscape, if we just had more people on the left that were talking about these things in a way that was more amenable and not as dismissive, I think that would be a good thing. Because I agree, guys should be more, kings holding up kings. I'm fully supportive of that. But at the social media landscape, we've got to be a bit more willing to go, hey, you got some problems, maybe working out might help you, maybe going for a few walks a day, maybe eating right's going to help you. Some of the basic good advice, dress better, hygiene, basic good advice that red pill people give, but without all the fucking bullshit.
Walk with them. Go on walks with them.
Arguments,
Do things
basically,
with them.
but like delivered properly. Like,
Don't tell them go to the
there's
gym. Go to the gym with them.
I want to ask a question.
I mean, I can't go
one
to the
thing
gym
that I
with
think
fucking
that
people in my
most
community, can I? I'm talking about, I'm a head of a community or whatever. I'm making
I'll let
content.
Erudite
Sorry,
ask her
Erudite,
question.
go on. My apologies.
So one thing I think that you guys are really missing is that when we look at mental health care, we don't really see it as an institution because it's not. Like it's this fractured, privatized, and it's a problem that it's not an institution because it's not readily available for people. It's not freely accessible, right? In all ways, we're underserving the entire populace with mental health care because it's not really properly institutionalized. I think a lot of us, at least I would hope most of us would agree with that. So I'm going to just start there. I don't want a long ramble. Just like, would you guys agree that mental health care isn't really like an established institution? Like, for example, like the court of law is, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like we need more
absolutely.
establishment of an institution of mental health care.
Absolutely. You shouldn't be able to use things like religious counselors as mental health care billed through your insurance for the kind of counseling that Jesse Lee Peterson does in the state of California, for instance.
So what
Especially
I would
because Jesse
argue-
Lee Peterson's kind of counselling
on.
is
I'd be
illegal.
careful with that. I'd be careful with that.
Hold on. What I want to point out is I think why we aren't seeing this easily pointable systematic oppression against, for example, I would argue men, is because mental health care as it stands isn't really an institution that can do this. However, what we do see in mental health care is all of the building blocks for an oppressive institution. What would you say if there was an institution that has always had highly biased research towards a group, that has dominantly used more so the opposite population group for its research? So it mostly uses women in this case for treatment care samples, and then it just generalizes across the growth. It also has historically treated your group specifically like a villain. It has talked a lot about concepts of patriarchy and misogyny, and in all ways it has painted you as a bad thing, and it has never actually ever uniquely looked at your population as a unique, distinct group and tried to consider what the problems are. I think anyone would look at this institution and be like, it's kind of being a little bit like there's something, nothing else, a little sussy going on here. What we see in mental health care is a vast
We're getting an
men.
echo. I'm just sorry. We're getting an echo from you, Stabby. Sorry, continue.
I didn't hear any anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
What we've seen is a vast underserving of men in the mental health care field since basically the 90s. Men, not just incels, men have higher levels of depression, higher levels of suicide, higher levels of addiction, right? All of these things, they have a vast history of basically having their emotions broadly dismissed by society. And we see some of this reported. For example, we just tell men to go to therapy and talk about their feelings, but it seems to be the case that certain therapies, like especially mindfulness and like emotional awareness type therapies, do really well with women, but men actually report a significantly lower success rate with
Because
these
it's
things.
gay.
So
It's
we have-
considered gay.
Yeah, it's not massive, but also it's possible that hormonal differences in the brain means that there are different ways to tackle mental illness problems across these groups. Now, so you have men struggling with the institution at far, and now you have this extreme group of men that are way more easy to hate because they fucking suck. They're nasty, they treat women like shit, they're homophobic, they're transphobic. There's all reasons to dislike. I don't blame anyone for disliking incels. I deal with incels, trust me, all the time because I'm in this sphere. They fucking suck. They're mean. The issue is if they're showing all of these mental health crises markers at an elevated level, even above men, I don't know how we don't say that there is a systematic problem going on and we are vastly underserving both men and distinctly incels.
The worst problem, just if I may interject a little bit, right? And
No.
I see you all. Oh, I will mute you again. Don't.
What kind of
test me.
chair bullshit is this?
Okay, look, this is going to happen because it's my show. I think that the worst kind of problems are the problems that are very hard to pin down, the invisible issues, the ones that we don't acknowledge, the ones that we don't see or refuse to see, right? There's none so blind as those who refuse to see. I think this is happening here. I think because men have had it so easy for so long, right, historically, that we think that they cannot, that this is just some kind of comeuppance. It's a balancing of the scales that now that they have to deal with these issues. And I think that it's causing a lot of problems, right? Like, it is easy to be sympathetic towards people who are struggling. But every time, right, I try to have these discussions, every time there is at least a few people who say, well, women have it worse, or this group has it worse, or yeah, sure, they have some struggles, but what about these groups? They have it worse. And it becomes almost impossible to talk about it. Sorry, rant over, back to moderating mode. Go ahead.
Can I just add something in there? I don't think anyone's ever mentioned in this conversation so far, which I think would be an enormous help, and I don't know how to bring it about in the slightest, but the feeling of sexual entitlement that a lot of younger men have drilled into them by societal forces, I think is really, really fucking toxic and poisonous, and ultimately leads to the feeling within a lot of young men that if they're not getting sex, they're being shortchanged by society in some way, in a way that they're not. And secondly, that they're less of a man, and therefore they act out in ways that are...
That's the biggest one, right? The people who make us feel the most shame are the people that we like to blame. It is absolutely, that is absolutely factor. I would never dismiss that. Absolutely, we see high levels of self-victimization where incels do identify as basically being like, everyone's against me and I'm always a victim, which is toxic. That's a really toxic worldview. I haven't seen any studies on entitlement, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw elevated levels of entitlement. And the entitlement does come from a culture that says, if a man doesn't have sex, he has no value. And the issue is that this is a deep, deep societal norm. And you could argue somewhat of a biological norm as well that is hard to disentangle. And that doesn't mean the solution is forcing women to have sex with them. That's obviously not the solution. But we do have to look at this and be like, of course, I debate with black pills, I debate with red pills, and they say every time a woman rejects me, when I live my whole life never having sex, there's this little part of my brain that whispers, you're just not fucking worth it. It would be better if you just killed yourself because you're not worth anything. That is absolutely what's going on. And so they become hateful and they blame the group that causes them the most shame, which is unfortunately women in this case. But that's why I'm saying this isn't women's problem necessarily. This is way more complex than that.
I'll wait for Stabby. I think she had her hand up. So
yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to say when Whick had said that that we hear about how much worse it is for women. I wanted to make sure that this never went there on this particular panel, and it didn't, which is fantastic. The closest I would get there is telling women, I don't think women should do anything more to help them than what we should do as a society, specifically in America, making mental health care accessible and affordable. But that's why I said, those of you who've had the benefit of therapy, that has changed your life. They told you were worth it, and that giant job you had to do, that you were worth it.
But Stabby, the whole point is it's not working. This therapy is not working.
Stop. I'm not saying to incels. I'm saying to women. The women who have had therapy, we need to start using some of that language. Yes, you are worth it. You didn't have sex today. You forgot breakfast. Oh, you're not worth it? Nonsense. Like, no.
I don't think. I think men.
Movement is fucking garbage.
No, I think
I'm
men
not
need...
Yes, it's so bad. Let me finish, and you will hear exactly what I'm saying. Those of us women who have had this therapy, notice what the therapist fucking said. They said you're worth it. They said you are worth all of this hard work. You can find ways to say that they are worth that hard work when you are talking to incels, especially if they're your brother or a family member. You don't have to let them continue sitting there saying, I didn't have sex the last time I tried, so I'm worth nothing. You've had the benefit of therapy. Use some of that language to go, you've done plenty of things that you're worth more than. You don't have to do this to yourself. You didn't have sex last time. Okay, you can have sex another time.
A little bit of a housekeeping thing real quick. I have to use the restroom. Prime, you're in charge till I'm back. Okay, be good. No slurs.
Got it. So then I won't say anything then. I'll wait to take my turn later on. So who wants to go next?
I just wanted to throw something in there quickly. And whilst I am 100% behind the idea that men need, better healthcare, access to therapy, I think it ties into what notsoerudite is saying. And it just seems like maybe those tools aren't necessarily what's needed for men in and of themselves. And also for incels, it seems like they need something else. It's like, for example, if you think about pedophiles, I'm not talking about child molesters, I'm talking about people who have the proclivity, the DSM-5 definition of being a pedophile. You know, I think that they need access to help so they don't end up hurting children. But like, I don't think that just saying to them, you didn't rape a child today, well done, you're fucking, you know, you're worth it, that isn't going to help. You need specialization in that issue so that a therapist can deal with it, and you got therapists that are willing to deal with it. It's probably the same with like a complicated issue, like, you know, had this deep-seated feeling that you're not good enough because you're not going to ever have sex in your whole life. And that's where more specialization and research is probably needed, is kind of, I think, not so Erudite's trying to point out. So whilst I in principle agree, I just think that there needs to be like a masculinized version of that. And I think I see it amongst male friendship groups, you know, kings supporting kings. This stuff does come through, and it's a slightly different way of looking at it. But yeah, I just think there's probably a slightly different approach that's needed to reach people that aren't
culturally
Do
speaking.
you have something that you think would be a solution that would be helpful in the interim? Because
Sex
this doesn't
robots.
work, this doesn't, oh God. Yes, okay.
Sex robots, obviously.
Wait,
Okay.
No.
I just
for
got back.
sexual
What are we
needs-
talking
He's
about?
kidding. He's
for
kidding. He's
sexual-
kidding.
Oh,
Okay. all right.
Sorry,
For sexual needs, sure, but they're looking for companionship.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
looking
they're
for
looking
somebody
for
to share
validation. They're looking for
intimacy
Get a
validation.
fucking dog then. No, I'm only
Yeah,
joking.
that actually, like, it gets back to the really, like, the heart of the issue, which is that, like, incels are not just lacking sex. They're lacking companionship and human engagement on levels much more fundamental than that create a feeling of isolation and lead to identification with this group that obviously nobody wants to be a part of. I don't think any person identifies with an incel, like, as an incel, because they have a healthy friend group, even though they don't have a girlfriend or a romantic attachment. It's a deep-seated feeling of isolation that starts much earlier than your engagement with the sexual marketplace and needs to be treated like an emergent mental health issue that starts with adolescence, in my mind. But Erudite probably knows better than me.
Well, I'm willing to bite the bullet and blame women for a couple of things, which is not
Yeah, me
women
too.
as a
All
whole.
of them,
And it's
actually.
not
Yeah.
about not having sex, but I will bite a couple of bullets. For example, when healthier men's movements have started, they have been absolutely attacked off of platforms, even when they weren't toxic. They often got toxic, right? But for example, I advocate for men all the time, and I haven't been deleted yet, but man, do I get a lot of vitriol distinctly from a lot of women. Women need to fucking smarten up about how they talk about men. There are movements that say unironically things like kill all men, and you might be like, these are radical groups. These radical groups are fucking gross. Just like radical groups of incels who say women deserve to die and we should kill them are also fucking gross, and both should be denounced. I do think there is some responsibility on women, which is essentially to extend the empathy to men and their struggles as you expect society to extend to you. That is all. And I actually do think women by and large are failing in this. If you look at how women are on like fucking Tinder and shit, it's damn antisocial. I know I'm on Tinder. I'm fucking antisocial. I just fucking flip through like nobody's business. I'll get 17 messages and I'm like, I'm bored. I don't want this anymore. It's fucking, it's bad. It's really bad.
The thing I want to quickly throw in there as well is I unironically learn a lot about women's experience in the world, in dating, in life, like the fact they're constantly under assault from men who want to fucking fuck them and shit, and all the bad shit that happens to ladies. You know, I've spoken to many women in my life and got an understanding. I'm a father, I've got a daughter, like obviously it's very important to me. So I think that like that goes both ways. So I think absolutely, you know, men should listen to women and their problems, but when it comes time for the men to say, well, here's the problems I've got, I think, you know, there should be more of a listening and not this kind of immediate, well, what about women's problems? Women have got it bad. Yeah, sure, I can talk about that all day and no one has a problem. But oftentimes when you try and talk about issues that men have as a man, you get attacked. You know, I'm sure Erudite, you get called a pick me. You know, much like as a man, if you talk about these issues, you get called like, you know, misogynist, or you don't care about women's issues and stuff like that. It's frustrating, you know.
I get called a libtard for saying that child support should not be something that we have, that it should be a child care stipend. I get called somebody who doesn't believe in male responsibility, and I'm breaking the men. I'm not breaking the men. We're creating a fucking poverty demographic.
Let's go to Prime
Absolutely.
real quick. He's got his hand up. Like
Sorry.
Alpha hands, right? Alpha palms, right there. Yeah. So I'd like to focus on something our friend Erudite said previously, talking about the abuses of the healthcare system. When like, and she brought up how it treats men, but I don't think we would, again, say that men are marginalized group, men in general, obviously, right, are a marginalized group because of that, right? Men are facing a disadvantage, certainly, and I love everything you said about like how the types of therapy that are being delivered to men may not be very effective at all. I think that's extremely
Saying the
useful.
same thing.
But Black people have also been treated badly by the mental health care system. We don't say that Black people are a marginalized group because of the mental health care system, right? It's a look at society as a whole and the way it treats this group, right? And that you have multiple overlapping institutions.
Well, it's more like your public education. This is why I said Black people have more marginalization, obviously. But just because like you guys have multiple institutions doesn't mean that one person having one. Also, you said that marginalization has to do with identity. That's not true at all. I can't find anything that says that marginalization has to do with a central piece of somebody's identity. For example, low income children or single parent children are considered typically a marginalized group, and yet it's not like a central part of their identity unless you want to say like single parenthood is a central part of their identity.
It's class, isn't it?
Well,
it's class, I guess, but like.
But no, I'm saying I agree with you. I
wouldn't
consider identity in the way that being Black is an identity. Class is a
'cause
material relationship.
It's changeable.
And it's
Yeah,
changeable.
it's
Exactly.
like
From a systemic standpoint, right? You're absolutely right. Obviously, there's social barriers that people face because of their identities that translate to systemic effects, things like trans identities, which disproportionately impact people's employability and mental health care access status, and a few other areas where I think identity overlaps with some systemic barriers, but generally I think I agree.
So I'd have to dig in with you on that previous point that I was making, right? That's a separate thing, and so let me get through this without you guys all interrupting me. To get to the point that I'm making now. But I'd be willing to go back to that point previously later on. But fuck, what was the point I was making? Talking about yeah. So I can acknowledge that the institution of or you said it wasn't quite an institution, sure, right? But the thing in society, the societal structure that is mental health care, is not properly serving incels, right, or men in general. Certainly not. But just because a institution is not properly treating or properly serving all the citizens doesn't mean that those citizens are necessarily being part of a marginalized group. That's the point I'm trying to get at, right? So like it seems like the entire conversation has been focused here on mental health care, which is good. That's a good thing, right? But I'm not seeing any overlapping I'm not seeing any overlapping issues here. I'm not seeing like how incels like don't get access to housing or in these other areas. I don't see that, right? I see that like in one particular area of society in terms of mental health care, they're being denied, right? So unless you would say that because according to the definition I read, right, where it says you're being denied opportunities and resources that are normally available to members of a different group. If you want to define, women and their vaginas as a resource that they're being denied, I mean, sure, okay, we can go down that road.
It's a renewable resource as well.
Mate,
they're being denied access to talk about their problems. They're being denied access, for example, to like to mental health services in many ways because they can't find a good mental health service. So like there are noteworthy things that they're being denied. I also don't like the issue with like I don't need to get stuck on the word marginalization. I don't really give a fuck about the word. I would say they're obviously an at-risk population. They're super high risk. I'm fully willing to grant that they're marginalized as well because they have typically different codes to code switch. They feel like their one culture is inherently antagonistic to the dominant culture, right? All of these things. I'm literally reading things from the Wikipedia, by the way. I'm not just like making shit up. Okay, these are all things that are like.
I didn't say you were making it up. I think it was stupid, but go ahead.
Okay, well, you can, I guess, take that up with who's this writer? Wilson and Barrister. But feel in anti-oppressive talk in their journal article. But that's fine. Like we're getting tautological. The issue is like if every way we've functionally outlined how these men are struggling, suffering, and need to some extent intersectional support, you can get sticky about the word marginalization. I don't really care. It's just like at that point tautological, because when I'm talking about marginalization, I'm mostly being functional, which is that we need to have specific care systems set up. We need to be training therapists to work within distinctly this community to address the fact that they're being underserved, and in the case of incels, probably actively denied access. I imagine most therapists would not be super keen, especially a woman therapist, on working with an incel in one-on-one therapy.
Same with pedos.
And power to her, exactly. Pedos as well. It's really hard to staff pedophilic treatment centers as well, for understandable reasons.
Yeah, of course.
The issue is that, yeah.
He wants to talk about someone who wanted to fuck a kid. It's horrible, isn't it?
Can I interrupt one thing really quickly? Can I like not compare maybe the discomfort? Okay, yeah, just the discomfort. Incels and like offended pedophiles who've offended. I don't like comparing those two.
I'm talking about pedophiles that haven't offended. Pedophiles that have offended to go to jail, obviously.
Right. Well, no, and they have court-ordered therapy, or if they've like
pedophile is a predilection, right?
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So I just don't want to
listen. If it bothers you, I'll stop talking about pedos. It's all good, okay? Consider it.
I mean, it's a simple enough comparison, though. It's just like undesirable mental health conditions to try to treat or staff.
Yeah, exactly.
And focus specifically on.
I think a lot of people would agree that borderline is also somewhat systemically, like, you could say marginalized, because it's really actually hard to find therapists who are willing to work long time with borderline personality disorder because it's unfun. Same with addiction. The burnout rate of addiction counselors is insanely high, and most people burn out on compassion first. It's really hard working with people with addictions. They're not a very fun population to work with, as much as it's like
once again, we're circling back to what I think Stabby said at the very beginning, right? Like the reason why I'm focusing on marginalized that marginalized group work, because it actually is important. That does have meaning and weight in our society. It does have policy implications in our society, right? So I think it's actually extremely important as to who we call marginalized group and who we don't, right? You'll have white people saying, well, I've suffered from reverse racism, so I'm a marginalized group. Like white people actually say this, and this is the thing that happens, right?
They're like an active
should we?
People
Excuse me, I'm talking. Fuck! Shut up! Thank you. Let me get through this. I've literally not been able to get to my point. So shut the fuck up. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Any which way.
Fuck.
Good.
Go ahead. Prime finish.
Right?
Okay, we don't need to go back. Yeah, Prime, you get interrupter time. Once you're done, we can allow Portland to respond.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so fuck, what was I saying? I don't remember the last thing I was saying. So people can't shut the fuck up. Fuck, really, what was I saying?
White people often say they're being marginalized in society.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Indeed, white people, will say things that they'll be marginalized in society, and then apparently make up other groups so they'll be marginalized too. But we don't pay attention to that, right? Because that's not a thing, right? We don't. And if we did say that was a thing, then the policy implications of that would probably be pretty disastrous. But if we are saying, if you're dropping the whole thing about them being a marginalized group, well, good, because I'm right. If you're dropping that and saying that's not important, well, then what Stabby said at the beginning is true, right? Like, none of us here are saying these people shouldn't get care. Absolutely, right? None of us here are saying, even Kevin Logan, excuse me, sorry for before, isn't saying that they should be studied, right? Research scholars shouldn't be head to this group, right?
Sure, but
all of us are saying that as a society we should care. All right, well then I guess there's no debate then.
But no, there's a debate, because the point is, if I listed off a bunch of people that lefties are generally sympathetic to, you go, yeah, they should get care and stuff like that. And I'm sure, clearly in this conversation you agree, but there's lots of people out there where if you propose the idea that incels need some sort of specialized access to mental health care, you'll get derided and people act like you're crazy. But, clearly based on the data that notsoerudite is bringing, clearly there needs to be something that is extra to help those people. So I think this is a problem where, because people don't understand the issue, and because it's men who share this oppressive identity with the patriarchy or whatever, there's a dismissiveness that occurs broadly, and it leads
Well,
people
this
towards
keeps
right-wing
happening.
content.
Yeah, this keeps happening in this discussion. Is people are like, yes, more access to healthcare, more access to healthcare, more access to healthcare. Cool, but that is not working for them. So what we are offering to them is not what they are needing, right? Like that's not what's being effective. So we can say all day, right? Like, oh, we just give them the same thing we give everyone, just more access to healthcare. But clearly they are not responding in the same ways and to the same efficacy that
But
everyone
we've
else
already,
is.
Wick,
So
we've
we need
already
something different.
addressed this. Wick, we've already addressed this though. Like,
Have you?
that's okay. Like, hold on. When I say that we need to research this problem, right? Do you think that mean that we gather data and then do nothing with the data? Of course, let's do something with the data. There are all kinds of groups, right? You can divide society in all types of different groups, and they're not being served, right, by different parts of societal institutions in so many different ways, right? Yeah, let's study those things so that everyone gets equally served. I'm an egalitarian that way, right? I want everyone to have equal access to these things, right? I would love for that. So we have already acknowledged this, right? Yeah, sure. Give if a researcher wants to or if therapists they want to like learn a bit more about the community, okay, great, but like whatever, that's like that should happen for any group.
Okay,
Does not
Portland, I know
marginalize
wanted to respond as well, and then I don't
Don't
know if
worry
Kevin
about me.
wants
Don't
to-
worry about me. If anybody has anything to say, you guys go ahead. It was a while ago, so
I guess I would just say, like, obviously, we've got a group. Like, the reason why I think people are wanting to use the word like marginalized is essentially because it implies some level of, as you said, societal wide view of something. Like, it says something about the way that society engages with this group, right? I don't want, of course, people want services, and that's all great. But if I talk about incels, I want to make it clear that I do believe that as a society, we're over villainizing them and underserving them, and that there are active things in our society that are fucking them over and making things worse for them. I do want to acknowledge all of these things, and I think the word marginalized does a really good job of acknowledging that.
Okay, can I ask you directly, Erudite, what is one thing that you would change, right? Like at how society marginalizes, or let's even not use this word, but disadvantages this group that you think that we can change right now? Is there anything, is there any low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that we could just,
Right now, that can change?
yeah, that we can just knock out?
No, I don't think there's
Okay.
any like one
Okay,
thing
fair
that I could like change. Like there's things I could point to being like, if it changed right now, we'd probably see a massive improvement. But these changes are sticky and hard, and it's a very large boat that's slow to move. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, Steph.
I have one for in the United States. I'm not sure about anywhere else, but I saw a study right next to another study, and one time an article that did both of them. I'll try to find the link, where it said that our views on promiscuity, like Americans are saying that promiscuity is messing things up. Like there's somebody even in the chat right now in Wick's chat today that was saying that going away from these conservative ideas, like men not having sex equals bad, but going away from conservative ideas for sex was bad. And the conservative idea for sex is don't have it. We need to get rid of the puritanical ideas that sex makes you a bad person, that promiscuity is ruining anything. Promiscuity is dangerous to us individually if we're not safe, if we're not healthy about it. I mean, mentally, physically, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, exactly.
But America has a double fucking standard about this. They're saying, like, there's an article, 2 articles side by side, and one says, men aren't having a lot of sex. This is bad. Also, like, don't have sex. Sex is bad. Like, pick a fucking lane. We
Yeah,
have to
exactly.
stop doing that to our people. We have to stop doing that to our men.
Yeah, a lot of these problems fundamentally fall down to weird,
puritanical bullshit.
yeah, weird, fucked up, outdated, unnecessary, shitty attitudes towards sex, both for men and women. I don't know how to change that. Like, I don't have any
on your
answers for
shoe
that.
and beat it.
I mean, I would agree with this, but this often affects like both groups. Like we have weird double standards as well, like for women and stuff like that, where we have like a massive push for like women empowerment, like your sex is beautiful, and so we have like a lot of like Cardi B coming up being like basically reducing her value as a woman to how good her pussy is. But then we also have people like still shaming and shaming women. I would actually argue that like probably the biggest societal change I would advocate for is people looking at men and taking their issues seriously and extending the level of empathy and compassion that we have for women and children to men, because we don't do that. We haven't done that, and we historically have never done that. That would be the biggest change. But like I said, that won't be an overnight change. I think think if you did that alone, we would see a lot of these like single male problems alleviate a fair bit, but we don't do that. So,
and if one of these people is your friend, one thing that you could do today, if one of these people is your friend, I don't care what you say. Do not say that you didn't score. What the fuck, man, or anything like that. Don't say that, because they respect you. You're in their friend group, probably the only social group they even have. Stop that. If a woman says it, yes, it's bad. I agree immediately, it's bad. But the thing is, you can call the woman who joked at him that he didn't score a bitch, and like have it off of your out of your radar completely. What you cannot do is do the damage of being somebody that they trust and care about and probably love as a brother or their best friend, and say you didn't score and joke about that. Don't do it. Stop doing it today. Don't let anybody else do it either without challenging it.
Do you think that we should encourage women to not select partners based on income? That they should maybe stop selecting men who have more income than them? Because that's a really common thing. Women always typically want men who make more money than them. Do you think that should encourage women to stop?
Yes, I absolutely do, because I don't think that alimony should be for anybody but the boomer generation, because those women don't have resumes where they can take care of themselves. I think that alimony is something of a bygone era where women did serve the home and had nothing that could come out here and actually earn their own income. I think that we also need to stop shaming men for adultery. I'm not trying to push polyamory, but I will say polyamory solves that many partners thing that men have, because now there's no such thing as me seeing a workhouse or my children being on the streets or any of us facing poverty if my husband finds another partner. So there's no need to morally judge men for finding another partner anymore. You don't have to be polyamorous, but please do ask polyamorous people how they're approaching that. Stop thinking that men are going to be there for your money. We can do it ourselves. As long as those control things that ruined our lives are not present, we're going to be fine. Everybody fucking breathe and chill. And I mean, check out what poly people have to say. Not to be poly, but just to hear how they're seeing some of these problems. Like, you could use to build your worldview just a little bit to see that, no, adultery is not some vile, evil person who hates his wife. Maybe
what the fuck have poly people got to do with this? Are you serious? Who fucking cares?
No,
Aren't most poly people mentally ill?
Saying,
losers.
Can I ask you? I just want Stabby on to this point, and I don't want to fall down this rabbit hole. This isn't a panel about polyamory today, but I do want to ask, right? Do you not think that someone who violates like the contract they have with someone else, like if you do expect to be in a monogamous relationship, right? And the other person violates that, do you not think that's a bad thing?
It is a bad thing if you violate the relationship. That's why I very specifically said, don't go to poly people to become poly. See the kind of the things they're viewing as a problem. One of those being men are evil or bad, like women are victims of adultery all of a sudden, because we're not. We can actually take care of ourselves now. The idea that monogamy, I'm sorry. The idea that adultery is something that is a man trait because they don't care about women. There needs to be a little human forgiveness there, not of the adultery maybe, but listening to why they were like that, like why they made that mistake. Maybe don't be so judge fucking mental, because we don't rely on their income anymore. We don't have to. So like, if we can stop like bad men, victim women, like this is one of the things that polyamory understands. So you can get this from anybody, anybody who has a view that's a little more augmented than what yours is. They can help you see what some of these societal issues are, so you can start treating people a little better when they fuck up, because they do fuck up. It's true.
Actually, I agree. I think there's a lot of autism in polyamory, so there probably is a crossover there we could look into.
Chud, Chud, you're pushing buttons. You're pushing buttons.
Okay, listen. I
get
it. Move us on. Take control.
I'm doing my part to help the incels. I'm having sex with more men. I can't fit anymore. What are you doing, Chud Logic? Nothing.
There's jokes, but I will refrain.
If you're having sex with men who are already having sex, then you're not really helping the incels.
Yeah,
it would actually just be more to their point of hypergamy.
Look, Chud is also having sex with lots of men. Okay,
I'm going to suck off an Indian autistic guy tomorrow.
My question is this: why aren't you having more sex with men, Chud Logic? Why aren't you doing your part?
Because I'm not sexually attracted to men.
Damn.
And he's not a
woman. All right.
So
that's gonna be an excuse.
Femboys maybe of age, obviously.
I want to say that like it's I want to be clear that like I understand this group. I think I understand them very well. When I was younger, I had a lot of the same thoughts. I didn't think we should like institutionalize like vaginas or anything like that, but like I had a lot of the same thoughts. But like it was before that again, incels became like that concept became a part of the zeitgeist in general. But like I had a lot. If you had talked to me and really dug into me, I had a lot of the same thoughts. And so I feel a lot of compassion. A lot of compassion.
Well, how did you get
So-
over it, Prime?
Pussy. It solved it. Pussy.
So you
Sure.
hit like you hit a good
Can I-
puberty, or
So-
like did you engage with good like role models and people who gave you good advice, or
No,
like
it's pussy. No, it's pussy. Pussy
that
solved it.
that's a really okay. So the incels do just need to fuck then, and you have no other.
I didn't
solution
make
for
the
them.
prescription
That's a-
for everyone, right?
Can I
I
can,
spoke
can
about
I
me,
bring
my
some
experiences.
can I bring
I
a
said pussy
quick
solved it.
levity?
I'm
I
just
swear,
gonna mute
quick
myself.
levity, if I can. Just quick levity. Wick, I think you need to get that dating app started called Wet Wicks, and I think that Prime needs to write an article and name it Prime's Pussy Palace to try to make his point.
Alliteration all over the place. We are winding down though, but I do want to the last question to the panel, and I'd like an answer from all of you if I may. Then we'll get into closings and we'll move on from there. If you do have a friend that you see going down this rabbit hole, because like Prime, when I was younger, right, when I was a teenager, a lot of the same, we didn't have the incel term coined, or at least I didn't know that was a thing yet, but I had a lot of the same thoughts, like no one's ever going to love me, no one's ever going to want me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually I did get over that, and I figured out, oh, well, people actually do like me, right? But for some people, they never get over that. So do we think, right, that the ways society is trending right now with the increased isolation, we have much lack of social gathering spaces that we used to have before, libraries, parks, other recreational centers, churches of all places, right? Places where people actually met in person. They're kind of going in the way of the dodo, right? So how do we fix this problem? Like, how do we get people who are on that path or who are at risk of being on that path? And how do we lead them towards the light, for lack of a better term? What should we do if we have a friend who is in that position? How should we guide them, I guess? I don't know if that's rambling.
Incels don't have friends. You're not friends with them.
Society has I would tell an incel, I've told an incel this before. And he was a veteran, so I probably could get away with it. I don't know if this will work for everyone. But I would tell them, what the fuck does society know if they're trying to make you feel like this? Because society is saying that having no sex is bad and you're a loser. But they're also saying that being promiscuous is evil and that you're a bad person if you do. So fuck them. Fuck what they're trying to tell you. It's okay that you didn't get sex this time. Let's work through
But a lot
it.
of it
It'll be okay.
isn't just sex. It is this desire for companionship and
Intimacy,
of the opposite,
cuddling
Yeah,
someone.
it's a lack of companionship that extends out to a lack of sexual intimacy, obviously. But these people don't have close friend groups. They don't have good role models at home. They don't have good mental health support to engage with them in the adolescent period when these emotions and these conditions foster and really start to take root in their psyche. That's why so many young men, like, we're all kind of alluding to the fact that a lot of us here had like an incel phase, or a phase where we maybe bumped up against a lot of those thoughts and ideologies, and we managed to have like maybe a really good late puberty, or some friends that brought us into a social group where we had more opportunity or something like that. But we got fucking lucky is the basic point I'm trying to make, that we didn't get pulled down the rabbit hole by the wrong influences, but that we were able to break out of those trends and establish a more healthy engagement with the opposite sex or with our desired sexual partners. But acting like this doesn't start at puberty, and that it doesn't need to be addressed with a lot more compassion to reach these emotional, hyper hormonal, super confused kids who fall down this rabbit hole at 16, 17, 18 years old, I think really dehumanizes a lot of the really, really reachable young men who are falling down this rabbit hole because they hear this rhetoric and they think we don't give a fuck about them. They think that we think they're pieces of shit. And I think Erudite hits on something really common and really important in a lot of her rhetoric, which is that the church used to serve a really important function for social gathering spaces and for people to foster the sense of community, but it's not coming back. So we need to figure out secularly minded replacements. And I think Prime and I would probably agree that a lot of those need to be government funded and like built out in a socialist view that doesn't require people to invest capital to meet their neighbors and invest their time in a productive and social way.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we?
Yeah, I guess I would say if you're somebody who, for example, watched Jordan Peterson cry about incels or cry in general and you made fun of him, if you're somebody who laughed at Kyle Rittenhouse's panic attack, if you're somebody who regularly looks at men having emotional expressions or outbursts and you laugh at it, you dismiss them, you're part of the problem and you don't have a leg to stand on. Look at yourself. We have construed a narrative for all of history that has lumped men into a group, when the reality is that most of history that was fucking us over was rich old white dudes exclusively. But poor men were suffering just as much, and they're still fucking suffering, and our society is still trying to make them pay the price of some rich old white dudes, which are still, by the way, really successful and have a great life and are fucking all of the women. We have always underserved men. We have never given a fuck about them. And if you are one of these people who mock any of these men, when you see a man's movement group taking off and you just want to attack it, you're part of the problem. Shut the fuck up. You don't have a leg to stand on. Work on yourself first.
Can I just respond very briefly to one little aspect
Go
of
ahead,
that?
Kevin.
I think there's a difference between laughing at someone crying about incels or whatever. Like, the problem I have with someone like Jordan Peterson is that Jordan Peterson cries at all the time, seemingly, at some really inconsequential things.
You're wrong.
And ultimately, excuse me, I'm fucking in the middle of a bastard sentence. I've barely spoken all fucking night. Shut up.
Every time you open your mouth, you're fucking wrong half the time. So I'm going to correct
you. Fucking brain
Jordan
worms.
Peterson.
Carl, who the fuck's talking about Carl fucking Rittenhouse? You brought him into the conversation. Shut the fuck up.
So Jordan Peterson cries at the exact same topic all the fucking time. He always had. He cries at the immensity at the idea of God, and he cries about how fucking sad it is.
He cried about Frozen.
Men just need
what are you talking about? He talked about the fucking kids. He cried about the kids' fucking movie Frozen. He's a fucking lunatic. He's gone in the head.
Do people who cry easily, are they lunatics?
No, but he is.
I'd like to use this.
He's fried.
You know what?
I think I know what you're trying to say.
Point.
I know
please,
what you're trying to say.
Kevin, never talk to incels. You are making the problem worse.
I don't want to talk to them.
Never do it.
I have no interest in talking to them.
Never talk about the topic.
Okay, all right.
My job worse. Every step of the way.
What the fuck is your job? What are you talking about?
Talking to fucking men about their dating problems. That's my fucking job right now. And I'm actually pretty fucking good at it, by the way. You're making my job worse. Just to be clear.
Good. I'm glad I did. Fuck you.
Can I ask you?
What? No, Stabby, shut the fuck up. This is mine. I'm sorry. I appreciate you, Stabby, but this is mine. Are you glad that you're making the incel problem worse? Men who hate
I'm not
women,
making the incel problem worse. You're just a freak. You're the freak on the internet. You a fuck.
You're glad that you're making this problem worse, that you're disenfranchising these men more.
No, I'm not disenfranchising shit. I'm glad I've annoyed you. That's the point. It's got nothing to do with fucking incels.
Absolutely.
So just shut the fuck up for once. All fucking night. Shut up.
Can I ask, if I may, Logan, are you saying that maybe you're seeing like kind of a hypocrisy there? Because I can say that Jordan Peterson's crying makes me deeply uncomfortable in a few of the aspects, not the one where he's saying that people will come up to him and say how they help their lives. Like, I can see that's very emotional, but the one that really gets under my skin is when he's crying and saying what real masculinity is supposed to be and engaging in things that he has viciously attacked only minutes before about wokeism and all of us with these emotions and these womanly ways to deal with things. And then he cries. Yeah. That one sits despicably with me. I'm like, you hypocritical piece of fucking shit. I hate that one.
Well, that's the problem. Ultimately, he was giving self-help advice to people while on fucking benzos. Like, deal with your own shit.
When he says, when he says that, when he cries and says somebody came to me and said, when he says,
it proves my point that men who try to talk about men's issues get fucking attacked off of the internet, to the point that you reduced him down to being on benzos. Just so you know, he was on benzos.
He was on benzos.
of 50 years was dying of stage
Look,
4.
that's what, I'm not attacking him for taking benzos. I'm saying don't give health advice to people when you're just eating meat. You're
right.
a fucking
No,
lunatic and you're on drugs.
We're calling it.
Don't do that.
I'm throwing a flag. I'm throwing a flag, gang. I'm throwing a flag.
I proved my point. I love
gang,
it.
we're gonna end. We're gonna wrap this up. It's been a journey. Okay, it's been a special time. Thank you all for coming here. Gang, just real quick before we do. If you like this content, I can't do this for free. If you've enjoyed the fact that I put this wonderful panel together for you, please consider subbing to the channel if you have not yet, gifting some subs, throwing a follow my way or two. I would really appreciate it. And I hope every single one of these individuals also promotes their stuff. Put your links in my chat, tell people where they can find you, etc., etc., etc. You've all been great. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. We are not ending the stream. We're going to roll on to the Prime Kai open panel afterwards, right? And Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, I'll be having my open call-in show where if you have a problem with anything I've said or anything that has been said, you can call in and talk to me about it. But
just remember, if you've ever been treated for a mental health problem, you can never give help to anyone else because you're basically garbage. And
Will you shut the fuck up? It's over.
Call her a bitch. Call her a bitch.
Chud, please tell people closing thoughts.
I'll call her the N-word. Oh, spicy.
Whoa, let's stop. Okay.
Wait,
Chud.
which one? Which one? Just to be clear.
I was doing the Chud. I was doing the Chud logic meme of like, maybe I'll say the N-word. Spicy.
This is getting. I'm liking this. I've got to be honest. Sorry, Whick. Please continue.
No, it's closing. It's your time to shine. What are your closing thoughts, and where can people find you?
I mean, look me up, Chud Logic, all good social media platforms. How do I follow that? I mean, yeah. Well, thank you for talking, everyone. I've had a great time. Good luck in your future endeavors. Okay, that's it.
Thanks for being here, Chud Logic. Always appreciate you. He's a great guy. Even though he looks like me, he's still, a great guy. And, it is what it is. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having. Go check him out if you haven't. If you don't know who he is, what are you doing? Not so Erudite, please.
I've said my piece. I won't take any more time.
Fair enough. Check her out, twitch.tv/notsoerudite. She's based as always. She's very fun to have. Really appreciate her coming on. Next up, Portland is burning.
Thanks for having me, Whick. Thanks, everybody, for being good sports. This was fun. I'm going to be on the Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll podcast with Madam Genevieve, Sleeve T Rocks, and Ginger Ramoth on Thursday. So, guys, give me a follow if you have a chance, or give them a follow. Don't give me any attention. Give it to much more deserving creators. But do check that out on Thursday. And thank you guys for having me. Incels are people too, God damn it.
Thanks for being here. Portland, you're great. Love to have you. Prime Kai, please.
Well, I disagree that you should give Portland Burning some love because they had like a nice charity stream previously. It's really kind of they put their effort into that. So shout out to them. And just taking a moment again. I'm not done fangirling over my man Chud here, right? I am so happy. I don't get to see him. This is the first time seeing him, but I don't get to hang out with him very often. But I really do like my friend Chud. And it may not seem like it when I was yelling at him, but I think he's a great guy. I think he's a fantastic individual. And the same is true for Erudite. The friendly face of the liberal enemy there. She's fantastic. And she runs a great channel, but I think you already know that. You should check her out. She won't shout herself out, but shout out for her. Check out twitch.tv/notsoerudite or youtube.com if she's on there right now. And thank you, Stabby. Stabby's great. Stabby's really fantastic. I like her. And I try to invite her to stuff. And
I had COVID. I'm so sorry. I had COVID.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. I mean, the betrayal has already happened. And thank you, Kevin Logan, as well, for putting up a really spirited fight. And shout out to my man Whick. I always appreciate Whick. I say it often because I truly mean it. He's a great guy. And he adds a lot to my community. And he'll be there for the Reverie, which we'll have right after this. Which you can find at twitch.tv/Prime Kai, PRIMECYES. If you don't know about me, we have debates like this all the time. We're going to have a completely different group of individuals who will be there, except for Whick. And so we'd love to have you there as well.
Are you still doing game streams too?
Game streams? No, I'm not.
No,
no one was there.
I was there. I was there, Prime.
You
I was digging the game streams. I was just curious. So sorry about that.
We do got to get to other people because shit starts soon. It starts soon, gang, and we're gonna raid into.
You fucking made fun of me during my gaming streams. Fuck
I did. It was that was why it was great. But and just to Prime, like I might be a couple minutes late because I'll have to do a couple things on the transition. But we love Prime. He's great. We are on his show, and I always love to have him on my show, especially when I get to mute him, which I did tonight. So thank you for that. Next up, we have Stabby.
Hi guys. I specialize in a woman's place and still mouthing off, so I will be starting a stream here soon, where I will show you how to sew, how to DIY, how you can turn glass bottles into spice things. I love sewing. I'm absolutely fantastic at it. I made this. I'm going to be starting an Etsy shop soon as well, so you can come and watch me put together things, including very naughty quilts that are talking about very, very not traditional subjects. I do things like that. I'll be starting a stream soon. You can find me. I just put it in here. You can find me at Instagram, Stabby Stitches Journal. To all of the Americans in the room, Stitches is indeed spelled with 2 T's. Please stop fucking that up. And I want to say that it was great being here. Great meeting everybody. Chud, I want to apologize to you that you get to be Wick's twin, but you have the looks, so you obviously can't have the brain. That went to Whick. I apologize. Prime, I absolutely promise that the next stream I say yes to will be yours to make up for having had COVID and saying no. I'm so sorry. And it's been a pleasure. As my shout out, stop telling men they have to have sex, and then stop saying that promiscuity is bad. We have to figure this shit out. Do not let society push our men this direction. We all have trauma. We all have all of this pain. And instead of going, we should compare this, because by the way, studies have shown that an old granny in a fender bender has the same exact kind of traumatic responses as somebody who's been blown up. So just keep that in mind. Instead of comparing it, I want you guys to think, oh my God, did this suck? Was it fucking horrifying? Do I not want it to happen to any more people? Perhaps it's time for me to not just have empathy, but have aggressive empathy where you actually fight against the injustices instead of just sitting there going, oh, wow, it sucks to not have sex, I suppose. Start fixing this shit, because you know what eunuchs used to be? Do you know what we used to do to incels before they were incels? They were fucking eunuchs. It was 1,000 times worse back then. We had slaves and harems and eunuchs. And I promise you, we do not want incels to be eunuchs. So let's fix our shit.
Yeah, Stabby, everyone. Stabby, go check her out. Go check her out. Her Instagram, she's posted in my chat. Stabby, yeah, there she is. Last but certainly not least, first time guest, hopefully not last time guest. Hope you enjoyed it at least somewhat. Kevin Logan.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed it enormously. I'm Kevin Logan. You can find me at KFLogan1875 on Twitch and Kevin Logan various other places. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night indeed. We're gonna raid out into Prime. Prime, again, give me a few minutes here. I got to get something to eat and things like that. But we love you all. And again, tomorrow, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, be here. We're going to have a special guest, co-host, Smite Night, and he's going to take calls with me. So,
bye.
Wave, bye, everyone. Bye.